On the floor of the U.S. Senate, the impeachment trial of Donald J. Trump grinds on. Have prosecutors proven their case? And will any Republicans break ranks and greenlight more witnesses and documents? In the city of Austin, a unanimous council vote to end prosecution of recreational marijuana. Is full legalization in the Lone Star State just a matter of time? And here at home, a local school district stands firm on the length of dreadlocks. Are the dress code rules righteous, or did punishment violate a student's civil rights? I'm Greg Groogan, and welcome to What's Your Point, where our panelists call it like they see it. Let's greet them. Starting us off, legendary reporter, did I say that? Reporter turned investigative media consultant Wayne Dolcefino. Next up, Craig Jackson, professor of constitutional law at TSU's Thurgood Marshall School. In the 3 spot, conservative attorney and Second Amendment expert Michele Maples. Batting cleanup, longtime super neighborhood leader Tomaro Bell. Next up, businessman and well-known columnist Bill King. And closing us out on the hot corner, Charles Blain, founder of the advocacy group Urban Reform. Let us begin.
Because right matters. Because right matters. And the truth matters. Otherwise, we are lost.
For the 3rd time in American history, the fate of a sitting president is in the hands of 100 United States senators. The impeachment trial of Donald J. Trump, like the commander-in-chief himself, has divided the nation. During the past week, Democratic prosecutors from the House delivered a narrative steeped in evidence alleging the president purposely withheld congressionally approved military aid for Ukraine in order to muscle the Eastern European ally into investigating Mr. Trump's chief political rival, Joe Biden.
President Trump had the motive, he had the opportunity, and the means to commit this abuse of power.
Republican defenders say the president's actions, objectionable or not, were within his authority and simply do not constitute an impeachable abuse of power.
I think it's very dangerous. I think if the House Democrats standard this time, if that's what holds going forward, anytime you have a president of one party and a House of a different party, they're going to impeach him. We're just going to see this as a standard tool of political warfare.
Okay, Professor Jackson, we're going to you first. Did Senator Cruz make any sense to you there?
No. I mean, it's a lot of evidence here. It's a lot of evidence. And the chronology of how things went down from the pressure that was laid on the president of Ukraine, Zelensky, from the very beginning to the whole, which was announced, and the Ukrainians were apparently aware of it because it was publicly announced in June 18. So the idea that the Ukrainians weren't aware of the hold, that's not necessarily true. And then the letter, the transcript itself is very clear. It says, though, I want you to do us a favor, though. So there's ample evidence. It's testimonial evidence, I think, to elicit a conviction. It won't happen, obviously, but if the senators want more evidence, they can get it. It's available. They just have to ask for it or subpoena it.
Okay, Wayne Dolcefino, there is no bigger advocate for transparency. Why not more documents, more witnesses?
So look, let's make this a cooking show for a minute, right? So what happens when you half bake a cake, right? It's all squishy inside. The thing I love about Democrats is not only do they half bake a cake, but then they claim this is the greatest cake in the history of cakes. That's the problem. Look, even if this was dirty politics at its best, right? And it probably was, and I don't really care, but even if it was dirty politics at its best, this is not the worst thing in the world, and it's certainly not something you take away a president, you take him out of office for. I'm just sorry, it's just not. It's not there.
Okay, if I'm a Ukrainian soldier looking at Soviet tanks or Russian tanks without javelins, it might be the worst thing in the world. But Tomaro, what's your take?
Look, let's go back to his, since he brought up the cake analogy. If you have bake a cake, all you do is put it back in the oven and let it get a little more heat. And then you'll have a full baked cake. So why can't you have more witnesses so you can get to what you're really looking for? Because you don't want to see it. So you want to do the don't ask, don't tell. And that way you don't have any additional knowledge. Look, it amazes me how the Republicans flip, because initially it never occurred. See, it never happened. I don't know what you're talking about. But then it was like, oh, damn, it's enough evidence. Yeah, it occurred, but ain't nothing wrong with that. It ain't nothing wrong with that. It's okay, because he Trump. Now, had that been spelled Obama, that would have been another issue. But because they know there is enough evidence, he did do it. But they eventually got the aid. I say it again, you shot me and drove me to the hospital. That don't mean you didn't shoot me. He held up the aid in an attempt to get what he wanted. And when he saw he was caught, then he said, yeah, you know, we did have that conversation on the phone.
Okay. Counselor, what's your take on this? Do you think it amounts to an abuse of power?
No, I don't. And I think Tomaro and Wayne are just hungry this morning, which is what all the cake references about. But number one, let's have the overarching idea that taxpayer money should not go to corrupt governments, period, right? Ukraine is known for its corruption. The testimony in front of the Judiciary Committee, there was testimony after testimony that corruption is always a concern with the Ukraine. It is within the presidential power to hold up or not even give aid to a country. That is not an abuse of power. And what Zelensky thought, who knows? But let's look at what Zelensky said. He did not believe that there was a this for that there was a quid pro quo. There is no abuse of power here.
Okay, Bill King, deep thinker. As you watch this unfold over a week of marathon testimony, you know, what was your takeaway?
Well, I've tried my best not to watch it because it's just painful. But like, my problem is, I don't know what abuse of power is. It's not a statute. There's not elements to the crime. And so abuse of power can be anything you want it to be. And so I kind of agree with Cruz on this. This is going to turn into, every time we don't like something the president's done, we're going to call an abuse of power and impeach him. There's a lot of constitutional scholars, including Professor here, that don't think you have to have a crime to impeach somebody. But the Constitution says it's treason and other high crimes and misdemeanors. It doesn't say abuse of power. It doesn't say obstruction of Congress. It doesn't say any of those things. And it seems like to me, if you're going to overturn a legitimate election, then it needs to be something really serious, and it needs to be something that's well defined, which means to me it ought to be a crime. Okay, political brass tacks. Does this help or hurt Donald Trump down the stretch road to November?
I still think it helps him. I've said that, numerous times. I think his base is going to be energized by this because they think that, like Bill just said, the Democrats are trying to overturn an election that he won justly. And I think on Friday what we saw was Adam Schiff overplaying his hand a little bit when he, went to display theatrics and say that any Republican senator that broke with the ranks was going to have their head on a pike. And then you see the four, or two of the four, Lisa Murkowski and Senator Collins, frustrated and vocally angry about what he just said. And so I think if the goal was to get them on the Democratic side on this issue and to support their push for more witnesses, he definitely overplayed his hand, and I think that's going to backfire a little bit. But I think in the end, this is going to help the president.
Professor Jackson, if the Democratic prosecutors called you, what would your advice be to them moving forward?
I think they would have to, I think a couple of things. First of all, to make clear about the notion of high crimes and misdemeanors. It goes back to the 14th century. The framers knew what it meant. They knew it didn't require a statutory crime. That's kind of black letter law right there. So the idea that there's some notion of criminal statute, criminality in terms of criminal statute, that's not a part of it. It's a red herring. And I would bear down on that. Make clear that this is the tradition. This is the term of art in law. High crimes and misdemeanors. That's how they talked in those days when they were wearing wigs and short pants. That's basically what it meant. It does not mean or require a statutory crime.
Got to leave it right there for right now. Stay with us. We're going to talk about what lies ahead in this impeachment trial after the break. Back to the impeachment trial, with the president's team is going to wage his defense ahead of a key vote midweek on whether to subpoena additional witnesses and documents. House impeachment managers need a simple majority, 51 votes, to greenlight the additional testimony and evidence. Will it happen? Should it happen? I'm going to go back to you, Professor Jackson.
Right. The reference to the 14th century was English jurisprudence, but the Defense Department did certify that Ukraine had taken measures to fight corruption, and when they announced that that they were releasing their portion of the $391 million on June 18.
Okay, Wayne Dolcefino, you have dug evidence and witnesses out of everywhere with Freedom of Information requests. Why not more witnesses, more documents?
Okay, look, I know you really want more witnesses and more documents, okay? We have screwed around with this thing for 5 months. Can we just stop? Can we stop? They lost the election in 2016, okay? They're already setting up. You heard Schiff say, you know what, if we don't remove him from office, then we can't be sure this election, the next election is going to be fair. Don't you see the play? Don't you see Act 3? Act 3 is going to be when Trump wins again, they're going to say, well, this time it was Venezuela, or it was Chile, or Jamaica, or some other country. This has to stop. I blame the Democrats in part for this because of this whole 2016 fake Russian, he's a Russian spy. Look, I'm not a 14th century expert like the professor here, but I have a feeling
21st century
they were thinking about a president that actually owed his allegiance to like England or France instead of America. Come on, guys, really?
Go Tomaro.
Look, it's just amazing to hear the words falling out his mouth, because some people might have investigated somebody 20 years ago, but they still hate them today and still trying to find dirt on them. I'm just saying. So to say that you should stop looking for information on someone who you think has done something wrong, coming from the esteemed, one of the best investigative reporters ever in Houston, it amazes me that you're saying you shouldn't look for more evidence or see more documents to prove a case.
There you go.
Okay.
Act 3.
20 seconds.
There's got to be an end to it. This cannot go on in perpetuity, and the Republicans need to make a decision. Dismiss this thing because we're all tired of it, or two, let's have more witnesses when there's already been 5 months of investigation and witness testimony. Let's just end this.
Okay, we're going to leave it there. Coming up, a Northwest Houston neighborhood rocked by a chemical explosion, the deadly blast impacting hundreds of homes and businesses. Is it finally time to start talking about zoning in Houston? That's our next topic when we come back. A major explosion this week killed 2 people, injured 18 others, and damaged more than 200 adjacent homes. While the blast at Watson Grinding and Manufacturing on the northwest side is still under investigation, the fallout has resurrected an old discussion. Is it, in the year 2020, high time for serious zoning laws in the Bayou City? Panel, clearly this disaster could have been much worse. Bill King, want to get your take.
I think the storage of hazardous materials in Houston is a problem. Zoning is absolutely not the answer. It would not solve the problem. First of all, we're never going to have zoning in Houston because you can't go back and retroactively apply zoning to a city that's substantially built out. I mean, if we applied zoning, we're going to tell these people, you can't operate here anymore. And by the way, it appears to me they were there long before the subdivisions that were around it. And so, I mean, that would be unconstitutional. You have all sorts of legal problems with that. So we're never going to have zoning in Houston because we didn't start out with it. I think also, by the way, it's somewhat unfair to say that we don't have land regulations in the city, because the vast majority of the city is covered by deed restrictions, which, you couldn't build this in particular areas. I think that the problem here is we have something called right to know laws, where you can go to a registry and look up to see what hazardous materials are in an area. So if you're going to buy a house, you know this is going to be there. But I don't know how well that's enforced. And I spent about 10 minutes this morning trying to find that registry on the internet, and I couldn't find it. So it's not, the most transparent system.
Okay, Tomaro, jump in here. You represent the neighborhoods.
Listen, I had an office within a half a mile of where this is, and the Chronicle has an article today about the discrimination in location of areas of offices like this. In Pleasantville, over 20 years ago, they had a warehouse over there. They had no idea what was in that warehouse. When that fire started, those people were out of their homes for a minute while they were trying to get that out. On Griggs Street, CES Environment had a waste contaminant that went all around. You have done more to investigate environmental hazards in this city than EPA has. They're gonna have to do something, because I could see those people's face. They had no idea that there was anything that close to them that had the capacity to remove a house from its foundation in a second. okay? And then when they get into looking at insurance and all of that and see how limited these people probably are covered because $1 million in Corvettes right across the street, this is going to definitely be an eye-opener. This made national news everywhere. It has to be.
Okay, Charles, I mean, moving forward for your generation, say we grandfather in everybody who's still here, but should there be better regulation moving forward?
If we're talking about land use regulation, I think we're fine there. I think what we need to be looking at is enforcing the requirements for inspections and making sure that these places are regularly inspected and making sure that, you know, air quality testing is done and all these kind of things to make sure the communities surrounding them are protected. I don't think that, I agree with Bill, I don't think that increasing our land use regulations is going to fix this. I think all that's going to do in the end is drive up costs for folks who can't already afford to live here. But I do think that we do need more when it comes to inspecting these facilities, because if I'm not mistaken, I saw somewhere that they hadn't been inspected for a number of years. And so I think that's what we need to kind of lean on.
Okay, Michele Maples, your family's in the pipeline business. I used to call Houston a whiskey and trombone town because it was just kind of the Wild West. I mean, what's your take on this issue?
We're whiskey and pipeliners, Greg. Lone Star beer, if you're my father. I know everybody's shocked that I'm a product of that. The oil and gas industry is already very, very heavily regulated, and I'm interested to see what sort of safety meetings or what sort of safety policies and procedures that this specific storage facility had. Because being in the pipeline business, I mean, every morning there is a safety briefing with the entire crew. And then they end the day with another safety briefing. It is safety, safety, safety all over the place in the oil and gas industry. So I would like to see how and why this specific facility slipped through the cracks. With land use, I don't think that's going to solve the problem. The problem is we need to look at this one specific incident, because it's obviously an isolated incident, and see what went wrong and how we can prevent it in the future.
King, did you just give me the hand signal?
I did, yeah. I want to make it clear, this was not a waste storage facility, not a hazardous. This was a fabrication shop,
Propylene.
essentially. And what I'm guessing is that this is an explosion. Every shop like this has a acetylene torch, which has a acetylene bottle, an oxygen bottle, which are highly volatile. And I'm guessing we're going to find out that's what caused the explosion. By the way, there are acetylene torches in 10,000 places in the city of Houston.
Okay, real quick.
Yeah, they were using propylene. There's another big factory that does the same thing over there off of 610. And one of the things, the neighbors in the need to do what Bill said and find out what's near, because I want to give kudos to Acres Home, because that cement plant, processing plant, they have moved out of that neighborhood because those neighbors fought for it. Mm-hmm. So you have to know what is in your neighborhood so you'll know what to fight.
Okay, we're going to leave it there. Coming up, a major move in the state's capital city to take the punishment out of smoking pot. Our panel, led by Dolcefino and Jackson, to tackle the topic after the break. Consuming marijuana, the act of possessing and smoking weed recreationally, just took another step toward becoming essentially legal in the great state of Texas. This week, the Austin City Council unanimously ordered its police not to arrest or detain anyone they happen to catch with cannabis for personal consumption. Austin leaders shoveled much of the blame onto the Republican-controlled legislature and Agriculture Commissioner Sid Miller, which legalized hemp for industrial use. Austin leaders say they can't afford to test confiscated weed to determine if it exceeds the minimum potency level to break state law. The capital city's police chief is bucking the move, saying Friday a city council can't tell cops not to enforce a state law. Wayne Dolcefino, your take.
Look, so I think all this marijuana stuff is nonsense and a waste of time. Like, let people smoke weed if they want to in their house. I could care less. I really couldn't. In fact, I'll even go farther, okay? I'll freak out some of my Republican friends. I don't care if all drugs are legalized. As long as you don't affect me and infringe on me and my family, if you want to sit in your house and be a vegetable all day, God bless you. Have a good time.
Okay, Professor Jackson, hopefully a more thoughtful response.
Wait a second. What was not thoughtful about that, Professor?
Well,
he agreed.
I went to law school in Austin, and people my age thought they had decriminalized it in the 70s.
Yes. So, how thoughtful was that?
But no, it's time. It's time that we reevaluate these marijuana laws, and Austin's going to do what it does.
Okay, Bill King.
So I'm the most anti-drug person you will ever meet. I think it's one of the great scourges of mankind. I think the the damage it does to families and the society and individuals is inestimable. However, what we're doing with this drug war for now 70 years is not working. And so I think it's time we need to think about a different approach. We're basically using the criminal justice system to deal with what's fundamentally a medical problem, and it's not working. We've got to come up with a new solution. I don't think just, carte blanche legalizing drugs is the right answer, but I think we've got to come up with a better solution.
Charles, you keep an eye on the states that have legalized it and have a stream of revenue. Is it working for them?
It seems to be, but what I think is going to happen here is that, similar to when Austin changed their camping ordinance for homeless folks and the governor stepped in, I would think the governor is probably going to step in and say that, and exert some influence there and try to say that they need to clean up this ordinance. But I think the bigger issue here is that if city council is going to go and move to legalize the usage of marijuana, they need to go and retroactively look at the folks who were arrested for marijuana, because if you change that law on Thursday, the guy who was arrested on Wednesday should be right in there and not have to go to jail for that. So I think they need to go back and look at
Okay,
those folks.
20 seconds, save some time for Michele.
I'm going to go with what Charles said. That is the problem for me with this whole thing. The many lives that have been ruined for a minimum amount of marijuana. And if you're going to sit up here and change these laws, those people need to be let out of jail. They should not be in jail and convicted and their lives ruined, pulled out of college and everything for that, if you're going to change the law. Because if the state looking at it from a professorial way, we're going to make some money off of this, you shouldn't make money off of them.
Michele, is it time?
It's time. I think Texas is one step closer to legalizing marijuana, much like Colorado, and it's only a matter of time before it's legal here. However, I think the bigger issue is that the city council is trying to tell Austin PD how to run their railroad, and they're overstepping their bounds. And what they need to do is they need to work with law enforcement as opposed to trying to tell law enforcement what to do.
Good discussion. Wayne, you really are thoughtful. Still ahead, he's a pro-life, low-tax conservative. Welcome back. In the critical fight to control the Texas House of Representatives, businessman Gary Gates is fighting to keep HD 28 Republican. A successful businessman, Gates has the full endorsement of Governor Greg Abbott. We want to note, Democrat Liz Markowitz was offered 2 opportunities to appear on this program 2 weeks ago and this morning. Meantime, Gary Gates has accepted our invitation. Welcome to the hot seat.
Thank you, Greg. Good to be here.
Okay, Democrats have been saying for months HT 28 is prime for flipping blue. You've been talking to voters face to face. Are you convinced the Democrats are wrong?
I believe they're wrong, Greg. When I got in this campaign, I decided I was going to take my message to the voters, and I began knocking on doors, knocked on over 17,000 doors to really understand the issues and to be able to prevent the Democrats from flipping this seat.
What are people telling you?
Probably the number one issue that I hear is property taxes. This is a fast-growing community. Assessed values have increased, virtually doubled in the last 6-7 years, and that is probably the number one issue.
So what would you do in the legislature to provide some relief, or what type of philosophy would you take there?
I think the legislature made some good moves this last session in being able to cap how fast they can rise. But we probably need to do more, because right now Texas has the 3rd highest property tax rates in the country. You've got people that with assessed values doubling, let's say in the last 5-6 years, that means their taxes have doubled. And so I heard stories after stories about people who are having to sell because they can't afford the taxes. So we need to spread that out so more people are paying in, and not put the burden just purely on property owners.
Hey, look, recently Governor Greg Abbott announced Texas would not be accepting additional refugees for resettlement. He says we need to spend the resources that we have on the refugees we have here already. Do you agree with him?
I agree with Governor Abbott on that. We already not only we receive economic refugees from California and Florida. We're the number one fastest growing state in this country, and we want to be sure that we keep that economic miracle that has made Texas the envy across the country and keep that going. So I agree with Abbott.
Okay, your opponent supports the principles of Obamacare and says Texas should fund comprehensive options to close coverage gaps between folks who have good income and the poor. What's your position on the direction Texas should take in terms of health care?
I don't, right now Texas does not accept the federal on the Medicaid program, and I think that we should continue to hold that position, because every state that has done that, they really bought into the idea that if the state contributes so much, then the federal government will contribute. Well, that's not working out, and now that burden is falling purely on the states, and the federal government isn't performing like they should on that part. And so we need to hold off on that and taking it more in a managed way.
Okay. We just talked about Austin essentially decriminalizing marijuana use, and your opponent has called for an end to the war on drugs, in quotes. What's your take?
You know, I think we can decriminalize marijuana possession because maybe some of the penalties have been a little harsh because it is devastating a lot of minority communities, and that's not good for families. But we can't just abandon the war on drugs. You know, fentanyl coming in from China right now kills more people than from auto accidents. So, you know, maybe we shift this war on drugs somewhat, but you can't just take the irresponsible position of just eliminating it completely.
Look, it's no secret. At a fundamental level, you are pro-life and your opponent is pro-choice. How would you represent HD 28 in the Texas legislature on this issue?
You know, my wife and I, we have 13 kids. We adopted 11 of them. And we adopted from mothers who were in prison or thinking about, or in jail or on drug abuse, or were thinking about abortion. And because of our belief in pro-life, that's why we began adopting. And we're very pro-life and want to protect life in all situations.
Look, we got a little extra time here, but your opponent had like 4 or 5 past or current presidential candidates come and endorse her. Was that daunting for you, or do you think it energized your base?
It has energized the base because all of her support and all of her money is coming from out of state, you know, and I keep hoping that Bernie Sanders will step in and endorse her because that is certainly, when I find that at the polls right now, that is probably what is energized, is this progressive liberal endorsements from these candidates is not going to sit in well with the Republican voters in this district.
You have knocked on a lot of doors, and a lot of doors just in the last week probably. Are people watching the impeachment trial, and what kind of feedback are you getting?
What I've seen increasing is the number of people that want to put an end to all this. Even on the Democratic side, this has gone too far. It's taken up too much time and efforts of what should be happening in there. Let's get this thing over with next week so we can move on to more important issues.
Gary Gates, thanks for taking the hot seat.
Thank you.
Okay. Still ahead, grassroots blowback for Elizabeth Warren's bid to forgive billions worth of student loans. Does it cheat parents who saved and sacrificed? Stay with us. We'll be right back. If you're laboring year after year to chisel down a mountain of student debt, Senator Elizabeth Warren's plan to wipe away all your red ink sounds pretty darn good. However, there is another viewpoint, and the presidential candidate got an earful in Iowa from a father who worked extra shifts and sacrificed vacations to scratch together tuition money for his daughter.
So you're going to pay for people who didn't save any money, and those of us that did the right thing get screwed.
Warren says her $600 billion loan relief proposal is about moving forward and not crushing future generations with debt. Charles Blain, I'm going straight to you.
Yes, well, this is an interesting one because I'm kind of split on it. Like, sure, I'd love to have all my student loan debt wiped away, but I think it's a horrible idea because I took it out and I should have to pay it back. I do think the overall issue is it's a bit of a crisis, though, because you have a generation of folks who are moving up and unable to buy a home, unable to start families because they're strangled under this debt. But wiping it away just absolves you of that responsibility. I mean, we got to learn responsibility at some point. And the folks in college today or in college in the future are going to get debt anyway. So are we just going to keep doing it over and over and over again? I think it's a bad idea.
King, I imagine you paid some college tuition. What do you think of this debate?
You know, the root of this problem is the incredible escalation of costs to go to college. I have to tell you, I went to the University of Houston. I went to law school there, and my tuition was $175 a semester. My books cost more than the tuition did, and so I got the benefit of essentially a free education. You know, my daughter went there, and I think it was $6,000 a semester. It is absurd how much it costs, and we've got, the problem is we need to get the cost of college down to something more reasonable.
Dr. Jackson, I know you see your students. You can almost see the weight going onto their shoulders. Your thoughts here?
Yeah, I think anything you can do to bring college debt down is important and it's useful. I don't understand the argument. That's an argument against any kind of social change. Before social change, somebody had to deal with segregation or had to deal with the discrimination against women. After social change, that's over. So I don't understand the argument about I had to pay debt. I had to pay debt. I paid my loans off. It was hard on me, but I would not diminish a person's ability to get their loan taken care of in the future.
Tomorrow I'm going to come to you, but save times for Wayne.
Yes. Listen, I was so happy when I paid off my loan. I think my daughter was 28. Oh, she's 29, yeah. Okay, listen, I do believe that there needs to be something done about student debt. I agree the school needs to be slowed down, but I don't believe that everybody's loan, that's just me, should be paid off. The government needs to widen their program. If you teach at certain schools and you're an educator, then they take off so much of your debt. If you're a nurse and you work at certain hospitals, I think that should be open to all other professions as well. I think that if you work in an area that's an under economic area, and it should go to you as well. But I don't believe that you should sit here and pay off. Isn't the U.S. debt high enough? I'm just saying.
Wayne.
One of the biggest mistakes we ever made in this state was deregulating state colleges and universities. Because since we did that, they have done this to us. You know why? Because they get away with it. Because they're arrogant, because they have big lobbyists, and because they have gotten too rich and powerful. A professor could teach more than one class a day, I think.
Final word.
If you spend 3 years in one of our military services, you get a GI Bill, you get to go to college for free. That's it. We've already got a loan forgiveness. The United States will pay for your way through college. All you got to do is serve 3 years.
Well said. Okay, still ahead. A tragic symptom of a chronic problem as a Honduran man deported a half dozen times returns to take a life. That's our topic after the break. In Fort Bend County, deputies arrested Marlon Zavala Alcantara on charges he fled the scene after striking and killing an 81-year-old woman in his vehicle as she crossed a street. Turns out Zavala Alcantara is a Honduran national who had been caught and deported no fewer than 6 times since 2001. During his time living illegally in the U.S., Zavala Alcantara had 2 drunk driving convictions and was charged at least twice with battery. Fort Bend County Sheriff Troy Nels called the crimes and damage caused by the suspect the direct result of Congress and their unwillingness to secure the border. Wayne, do you agree with that?
You know what? I'm not a big fan of the sheriff, but he's actually right in this particular case. Look, this is one of those things that confounds me about people who are liberal on immigration. If we can't all agree that once you come here illegally and are caught and are deported for whatever reason, when you come back, you should not be able to do that. If we can't even agree on something as so obvious as that, that's why it's screwed up. And I also think the media deserves the blame, because the media won't tell you this story. They're afraid of this because they're afraid of having folks in their office protesting. I know what it is.
Okay, Bill, this is a tough one. I mean, you know, this strikes people at their core and I think molds their position on immigration.
Well, it's just symptomatic of the dysfunctional immigration system that we have. I mean, I don't understand why the guy, when he was caught the second time, wasn't prosecuted for illegally entering the country. It's just being deported again. It's just laziness. It's just easier to deport than it is to prosecute that crime. Look, any good immigration system has got to have control of the border. Now, I'm not an anti-immigration person at all. I think we need immigration in this country. I think the vast majority of people come here for the same reason my ancestors came here, to make a better life for themselves. But that doesn't mean that every person coming here is a good person. And so to the extent that we possibly can, we need to screen out those people that are going to be problems. And our whole system is just broken right now. And both parties have a vested political interest in it being broken, and so they won't go fix it. We've known how to fix this for years, and they just will not go do it.
Michele Maples, what's your point on this?
There is an issue. If there is one guy who is able to slip through our border 6 times, you cannot tell me that this is not a porous border when this individual was able to come to this country so many times and then to get deported so many more times after committing a crime. What needs to happen is this guy, what he could be charged with is failure to stop and render aid after a fatality. That's 20 years. And then he needs to go to the federal court across the street and be charged with an illegal re-entry. That's another 20 years. Put this guy in prison for 40 years so that this is a non-issue. Get this guy off our streets.
There's a point there that repeat offenders who come after being deported are not charged with aggravating offenses on re-entry. Professor Jackson, what's your take?
I think that 2 points. I think one thing, we got to avoid conflating criminal law and law enforcement with immigration policy. They're actually two different things. It's like saying that a tax cheat who gets away with it and then commits murder, then the tax system is the problem. But I don't think anyone's saying that we don't have the right as a sovereign nation to protect our borders. We do. The question that I get, and the issue that I hear in the conversation among liberals, is that the enforcement should be humane. We definitely should have enforcement, and this fellow should not have been over here. But it's not the immigration policy. It's the fact that he was over here and not prosecuted.
Okay. I know we're going to talk about this in the future. But that was a good conversation. Yeah. Okay, up next, a Texas teen refuses to trim his dreadlocks and pays a steep price. Did a local school district violate his civil rights, or should each community retain authority to set basic standards? That debate after the break. Welcome back. The Barbers Hill School District has drawn plenty of attention this week by insisting a student abide by its dress code and cut the length of his dreadlocks. That student, 18-year-old DeAndre Arnold, says the dress code mandate is a violation of his civil rights. Despite an outpouring of protests and outcries by celebrities, Barbers Hill ISD stood firm on its policy, insisting that without compliance, Arnold would spend the rest of his senior year in in-school suspension and would not be allowed to participate in the graduation ceremony. Friday, Arnold's parents removed their son from the district. Charles Blain, I know you've been thinking about this. What's your take?
Well, I'm glad she removed her son from the district instead of cutting his hair, because it's ridiculous that they're forcing him to cut his hair in order to walk in graduation. In middle school, I had long hair too. I didn't have dreads, but I had these braids that came down. And it is a part of you. It is a part of your agency. He has been growing his hair out for a very long time. So to force you to cut your hair to walk in graduation when it's the hair you've had throughout your high school career is absolutely crazy. And I think this opens a door for, we've heard other states do this Crown Act where employers aren't allowed to dictate how people's hair should be. I think state lawmakers might start looking at that next session.
Okay, Professor Jackson.
Yeah, I mean, these laws. I thought they got rid of these laws because I had a very large afro in the 70s, and I did. And my father told me to cut it. My father told me to cut it for graduation, and I didn't. I went ahead and marched, and he was my high school principal, and he was mad, but he got over it, though. So these are
Tomorrow's about the
hair laws. Hair laws.
Go ahead.
Look, he has been wearing that hairstyle since 3rd grade. If you know anything about dreadlocks, they grow, okay? So this isn't a new hairstyle for him. The problem that I have with this is that because he's had it since 3rd grade, the school knew he had it since 3rd grade. To come at him and say, okay, well now they've grown too long for us, now you need to cut them off, and how that impedes his education. And even though his parents pulled him out, and I'm glad that they pulled him out instead of cutting, when you're a senior, those are your people. You've been with these people. This is your last time to be with them. Yeah. I don't think the school was right in that. And it is an ethnic thing, because suppose he had a hijab on his head or whatever, and they don't want you to wear that because you can't have a head cover when you're walking across the school. Where does it stop?
But should Barbers Hill ISD have the right to set its standards? Its board sets the standards. They're democratically elected. Wayne.
Yeah, I think they do. I'm a little uncomfortable with them doing it when the guy's in like 11th grade, right? And it is nice to know now that we've established the professor was a dope-smoking afro-wearing. but back to the subject of
afro-wearing.
Afro-wearing, I'm sorry. But back to Barbers Hill. Look, my kids call me Boomer, okay? Because I went to school, public school in Brooklyn, right? And we had to all wear ties and all looked exactly the same, okay? So I'm cool with that. I was always cool with that because that's where I grew up. I don't think we should let everyone do whatever they want, because if we do that, then it may be hair today, it may be tattoos tomorrow, it may be whatever else, something. I think it's a problem.
Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I disagree with Wayne about this. Look, in our entire founding was based on the protection of minorities. And back then, by the way, they weren't talking about racial minorities or gender. They were talking about people that thought differently about things, about religion or anything else. What legitimate right does a school board have to say about how long somebody's hair is? By the way, when I was in Clear Creek back in the late 60s and 1970s, we fought this battle back then. I thought for sure it was over.
I thought that's where he was going.
Still ahead, a parent pulls her kid off a team because she doesn't like the coach's politics. Our panel is ready to render judgment when we come back. Welcome back. A warning sign about where we are headed as a country. Check out this tweet from former major leaguer and outspoken Trump supporter Aubrey Huff. He says a parent pulled their son off the Little League team he was coaching because he supports the president. Okay, crew, thoughts? Michele Maples.
This is sad, and this child is the real loser here. This poor kid got stripped from his friends or her friends from the Little League team because the father doesn't agree with the coach's politics. I think this is a symptom of what is going wrong, and we're headed down a bad road with this, that we're not able to have civil discussions or discourse without somebody freaking out and pulling their kid off of a Little League team. I mean, for instance, I had a Bill King sign in my front yard that was stolen because somebody had a differing opinion, and this is a very, very dangerous road, and the kid is the loser.
Do you agree with that, Tomaro?
I don't think that you should base who your child play baseball with on whether the coach is politics or not. I don't think that's going to come up. As I said, I would rather watch grass grow than watch baseball. But my children did play Little League, and I did have to suffer through that. And I agree with her. He still is friends at 23 with people he played Little League on. And I think that the parents should have thought about the child.
Bill King, real quick.
Just complete nonsense. I'm so tired of this hyper-partisanship. And that, you know, if you're not on my side, you're a bad person. It's really tearing this country apart.
Charles Blain?
Yeah, in 4 years, we'll have separate schools for Democrats and Republicans.
Segregated schools.
I have 3 words to share with you. Liberals are bullies.
I'm gonna give Jackson something on that.
Well, I think it's his right to support who he wants to support. It's her right as a mother to have her son associate with who she wants him or her to associate.
Okay, real quick.
That's not the question.
Congratulations to Wayne Dolcefino.
Yes! I love it when you call me Big Papa.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, how you feeling?
I'm shocked.
We're happy for you.